A lot of talk after this Monaco Grand Prix, particularly from the drivers, about how boring it was, about having to make the tyres last all the way to the finish with no pit stops, very slow speed race. But I think from a spectator's point of view, and I think from a Formula One point of view, this was a fabulously emotional Grand Prix win. Charles Leclerc's gone through a lot in his life. He lost his father right at the beginning of his Formula One career, and he lost two very close friends at a very impressionable stage of his career as well, Jules Bianchi and Antoine Hubert. And he's a very, very polite, calm and humble man who has enormous support in Monaco. It was no surprise to see the Prince in tears on the podium. That's how much this win means to this area. And of course, it isn't just this area, because this Monaco Grand Prix, this Monte-Carlo, is so important to Formula One, to Formula One's image, to Formula One's shop window, and it's so important in terms of the heritage of the sport. A Monegasque has won the Monaco Grand Prix before. That was Louis Chiron in 1931. Louis Chiron, similar story in a way, started as a doorman at the Hotel de Paris, persuaded a wealthy customer that he should be given a run in his car, and won that Monaco Grand Prix in 1931 in a Bugatti. So it has been done before, but of course not in modern times, not since the Formula One World Championship has been inaugurated. I'm near the helipad here, so excuse all the noise of getting in and out like passenger trains. Anyway, just a superb win for Charles, for the new team that's running his car, Brian Butzi, Jock Clear, obviously, and for Freddy Vasseur, what an achievement for him. And Carlos Sainz backing it all up with that P3. An extraordinary P3, and I suppose now's the time to get on into the whole structure of the race, in how odd this race was in so many ways. Let's talk about Carlos first of all, because on the face of it, he got involved in a first corner incident with Oscar Piastri. It punctured a left front, one of those very sharp little angles on the floor of the McLaren punctured the left front of Carlos's Ferrari, and it was evident as he went into Massenet, locked up the front. It was off the whole thing was out of skew, and he pulled off on the left, just avoiding the barrier at the top of the hill. And yes, I suppose if there'd been no red flag and there'd been no accident behind him, he probably would have, once the field had gone past, he probably would have got into reverse and probably would have been slowly round to the pits, and he would have, finished, I don't know, maybe he would have got into the points, who knows. Instead of which, there was a red flag. There was a red flag because both Hasses had started from the back of the grid due to a rear wing infringement. And here I should just say in brackets, I'm not convinced there was any performance advantage there. It was a new rear wing for Monaco, and they just set it up wrongly, incorrectly. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Anyway, they admitted it openly. They both moved to the back of the grid. And Sergio Perez, who should have qualified a lot better, was there as well, made a relatively poor start and came out of Saint-Devote. And I've often said in various live streams, when people have asked me about the evolution of safety in Formula 1, I've often said one of the most dangerous places on the Formula 1 calendar is going up the hill from Saint-Devote, particularly on the first lap, because the track gets very narrow there. It weaves, particularly after the wide entry into Saint-Devote. And there are a lot of cars all packed together, and these are huge Grand Prix cars, don't forget. So the two Hazzards on either side, Sergio's in the middle. Everybody's kind of blaming Kevin Magnussen. As I saw it, he was on the right-hand side. He was kind of following what the track was doing. Sergio Perez is in the middle, a little bit ahead of Kevin, and then there's Nico Hülkenberg on the left. And basically three tried to go into two. And who should have backed away? Sergio Perez obviously blaming Kevin, saying he should have backed away, but he was well on the right. So all he was doing was just staying on the right-hand side of the road. Indeed, he actually hit the wall on the right, as well as Sergio Perez. So I think it's fair enough to say it was a first corner accident. Big shunt, great to see everybody getting out unharmed. Says a lot about the survival cell in Formula One. Says a lot about the Armco barriers there as well, and how well they did to protect marshals and bystanders going up the hill there. So anyway, that brought out the red flag, and as a result of that, Carlos Sainz was able to drive slowly back to the pits, listening on the radio to his team telling that because it had been red flagged, he was going to be able to restart in P3, his position on the grid, because when it's red flagged, it's taken from the results before, and the results of the lap before was the starting grid. And because the race had actually started, they were all allowed to change tyres. That goes back to a situation, actually it came to a head at Monaco several years ago. That new rule came into play, and they're allowed to change tyres. So there was Carlos, who was effectively out of the race. Suddenly, it was as if it was going back to the old days when completely new start, Carlos Sainz back to P3, let's go racing. Oh, and no more pit stops required. No more pit stops required because everybody who'd started on hards went to medium, so there was their tyre change, and everybody started on mediums went to hards, and there was their tyre change. But here's the point. I don't know how many of the public were aware that a Pirelli tyre can go a Grand Prix distance. We often talked about that on live streams. Wouldn't it be great if Pirelli started to build tyres that could go the Grand Prix distance? Of course, there's no reason to do that because the regulations say that you have to change compounds at least once in the race. But that's there kind of to help Pirelli not having to build tyres that do full Grand Prix distances. Very expensive technology, that. And beyond that, in theory, it's to make the racing a lot closer. But here's an example of where it didn't make the racing any closer. In fact, all it did was make the racing unbelievably slow. Racing, if you can call it that. The driving unbelievably slow. And here it's worth saying that before each Grand Prix, Pirelli give the teams detailed information on what they understand based on a lot of data they've got, obviously, and a lot of testing they do at the factory. This is based on performance and life. In other words, how quickly, if it is going to go off the cliff, is it a sudden drop off the cliff? And also, what is the life of the tyre? So the teams do know going into any given Grand Prix, in a situation like this, when a red flag comes out on the first lap of the race, is that tyre able to do a full Grand Prix distance? I think the only circuit where Pirelli have said that they could do the distance is Monaco. I think maybe Baku, they could probably do it as well. A lot of it is to do with the abrasiveness of the surface, and it's very smooth at Monaco. There's very little abrasion. And so they were running absolutely the softest tyres they could have here at Monaco. And so all the teams knew when that red flag came out that the hard tyre could do a full Grand Prix distance. I'm not sure that they all thought that the medium could. Maybe Pirelli said it could, but you really need to manage it. But it was a bit iffy. But anyone who'd started that race on hards, like the two Mercedes, like Max Verstappen, had no option but to go onto the medium, so it was kind of a moot point. So everybody went into that restart with Carlos Sainz back in P3, knowing that they were then going to do the full Grand Prix distance. Now, the public didn't know that. And if you're watching out at Sandervoort or up the hill or into the swimming pool, they still look unbelievably quick. Yes, to the teams, and I'm sure to the media watching it all there on the computers and looking at every lap time. They're all relating it to qualifying, they're relating it to last year's lap times, they're all saying how slow it is. But what they're seeing in the public areas at Monaco is cars bunched together. They're seeing Charles Leclerc under a lot of pressure from Oscar Piastri. So it was sort of on the toes racing, if you like, from start to finish. It was a great race in that respect. Of course, everybody knows how difficult it is to overtake at Monaco. And that was the thing, of course. Most people knew that so long as Charles didn't make a mistake, he'd got that race won. And obviously, reliability coming into it. And it was a similar situation with George Russell and Max Verstappen in the late phase of the race. George out on that long run on mediums, running them all the way through to the finish. Fabulous drive by George. But Max, having stopped going from medium to a set of hards, was all over George Russell. And I think from the public point of view, George Russell not making any mistakes with those medium tyres, presumably on the edge and somewhere near the end of their life. Not one lock-up, not one mistake going into the chicane, going into Rascasse. Fabulous piece of driving. And from where I was sitting at Monaco, a lot of people appreciated that and realised how good a job George did in that car. So going back to the front of the race, Charles Leclerc going into the unknown. The last time we've had a full Grand Prix distance on a dry tyre without a pit stop. I say full Grand Prix distance, you take off the two formation laps. Well, it would have been before the Pirelli era. Yeah, you've had other drivers do long things. Albon, I think, the Australian Grand Prix last year, did a long run, but nonetheless there was a red at the end, and it wasn't the same as what we had at Monaco. This is the first time we've ever had this situation, a red flag at the start of the race. It's amazing, really, because you'd imagine there are quite a lot of first corner incidents, first lap incidents in Formula One, and that the races would be red flagged quite a lot. But for it to be red flagged on the first lap, on the circuit where Pirelli have told the teams they can go the full Grand Prix distance, that's never happened. That's never happened in the Pirelli era. And that's amazing, really. And I think full marks to Pirelli for that. Bearing in mind they're in this regime of having to build tyres that only do the half Grand Prix distance. Pretty amazing. And no issues at all, apart from Stroll. I mean, he had a puncture, but he hit something, didn't he? Hit the guardrail, hit guardrail at some point. So Charles Leclerc's out there. What, of course, the unknown is how slowly actually to drive the race, and that was a difficult thing. And Oscar Piastri would have been playing off Charles Leclerc. There's not that much problem with running in dirty air at Monaco. It's not great. It's not as good as being in clean air right at the front, but it doesn't have the same downside as it does at, say, I don't know, Jeddah or someone like that. So it wasn't that big an issue to be close to the car in front. And from the point of view of the fans, that's a great thing. You've seen these cars coming into Rascasse absolutely nose to tail, and everybody's on tiptoes thinking what a wonderful race it was. So what I'm trying not to do in this video is go down the path of saying, oh, that was really boring, that was Formula One at its worst, you know, what was that all about, just an endurance race? I'm not going to go and take that path, because I thought actually it was a spectacular day, and it was capped by this brilliant victory. Brilliant in the sense of his career and what it means for Formula One. Brilliant victory for Charles Leclerc. And he didn't know how slowly to run. So he was in front, knowing, of course, that it was very difficult for Oscar to overtake. There were a couple of moments when Oscar was sort of very near him. And there's Carlos Sainz, couldn't believe his luck, up in P3 again. And he's pulling away from Lando Norris, who's thinking, well, I'll stay in clear air. And then Lando gets a bit nearer towards the end of the race. And so it was. I thought it was fabulous. I really enjoyed it all. And I don't know if I'm a lone voice or what, but I just thought it was a great day's racing. And then there was George doing that fabulous job. And then there was Lewis wondering why he hadn't been told to go a bit harder on his outlap and maybe got ahead of Max Verstappen. Well, you know, Lewis is pretty good on his outlaps. I'm surprised he needed to be told to go that quickly, but Max making that stop. Red Bull, not good around Monaco. We've talked about that already. They're talking about the curbs, they're talking about bouncing. I mean, all those are factors. The ride is a factor of what they have to operate at in order to get the car to work with downforce on a slow circuit, and the stiffness they have to run in order to keep that ride. But that's part of the compromise at Red Bull, because they got a car that's also very quick on the straight when the circuit has a straight, as I hope I've pointed out in the previous video. So they live with that, and Max, obviously wasn't a great day for Max Verstappen, but he came round, he got through the first corner on both occasions, wasn't hit by anything. He's not used to being in traffic like that, is he? So that was something. And I thought Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly also did an outstanding job in their own ways. Yes, you could say it was such a slow race that even an Alpine could finish in the top 10. I think some cynics are saying that. But you've got to get there, haven't you? You've got to get into Q3, and Pierre Gasly did that. He dragged that car around, and he deserved that point for Alpine there first. It was first points for Williams as well. Very good drive by Alex in the Williams. And I suppose he can use the boring word for the races of Fernando Alonso and Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel stuck behind Fernando, both of them knowing that they were just going to have to try and make the tyres last and going nowhere, but really slow. They were slow. They looked slow. And I think a lot of people would be thinking, I'm surprised actually, knowing Fernando's character, that he didn't just put soft tyres on and just pass people and just sort of do something spectacular, because it didn't look good for an Aston to be going around behind dropping away from the Alpine. As good as that looked for the Alpine fans here in France, it didn't look good. It wasn't a good look for Aston Martin, I don't think, to be going that slowly. And the other thing worth talking about was the shunt at Portier on the first lap between Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. How many times have we been saying on this channel, two French drivers in a French Formula One team, similar stages of their career, similar pace, similar ambitions. No matter how much you say to those two drivers, stay away from one another on the first lap or whatever it is, they're never going to do it. They're always going to drive their own race, and it's always going to be like that. On this occasion, it was Ocon that came off worst. Very lucky not to go over, actually, down the inside of Pierre Gasly when Pierre wasn't expecting it at Portier. And I think Pierre probably correctly not expecting it, because it wasn't as if he left a gap or anything. But Pierre then muscling on and bringing that car home in the points. So very good drive by him. So yeah, just to finish, it was one of those weird days. I mean, I was absolutely full of exultation as I walked back to the Formula One paddock after the race, because of Charles' win and because of what that meant to the Principality, what that meant for Ferrari, what that meant for fans of Formula One around the world, what that meant for Charles as a human being and his career, and the fact that his dad isn't here to enjoy this win with him, and how much this would have meant to his dad. To me, it was a momentous win, a momentous occasion. But then to get back into the paddock and start chatting to a few of the drivers and engineers, they were all just saying how boring it all was, and you know, what an unfortunate race for Formula One. But I'm not, as I say, I'm not going to go that path because I thought it was a great race for Formula One. So in finishing, all I can say is congratulations to Charles. I think that the party tonight over in the sporting club there in Jimmy's is going to be probably the best ever. Big firework display, they always have it. But you know, Charles will be absolutely perfect. Of course, there'll be no problems with whether he's got the bow tie and the dinner jacket because this is his hometown. But it'll be so emotional for him, and to do it in a Ferrari as well. It's just one of those moments in time in Formula One that come along very rarely, and I think we should appreciate them. And none of that talk should detract from what Charles Leclerc achieved today. So congratulations to him, congratulations to all who put that win together, and thanks for doing it. It was brilliant to watch. Thanks to Jetcraft, thanks to Pitbox, and thanks to OEM Exclusive for your support of this channel. Thanks to you, the viewer. As I say, I'll be doing some live streams in the days to come. Next race, Canadian Grand Prix. I don't think Red Bull are going to be off the pace in Canada. I think they're going to be pretty quick in a straight line. And there are a lot of straights in Canada. There's a long straight there, and a couple of others as well. So looking forward to that one too. So in the meantime, thanks for watching. Take care.